Yes, boys, are back with another episode. I've got a banging cold, so excuse me if I'm like constantly like breathing into the mic or like sniffling. Or if my voice sounds a bit like monotone today. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's I don't know what it is. It's just an illness. But today we're going to talk about how to actually break through barriers and how to go deeper than what the standard self-improvement advice allows you to get. So if you've been in self-improvement for a while, you'll find that, or if you're just starting on self-improvement, there'll be a stage where you make this like compounding growth where everything's really new and novel and you're constantly progressing because you're constantly retrieving information that's really enlightening, and it's showing you, oh wow, I didn't know you could do this, or like the standard way of living of being in the rat race and going out to the pub and drinking and eating all this junk food. I can actually do things that help me towards doing that, and you start finding out these very like you start breaking through the artificial constructs of what it is to live in society where like the average person just lives an average life. You start realizing that, wow, through projecting ideas in your mind and setting goals and being disciplined, you can progress in life and you can achieve material success. You can get in shape. You can build confidence, blah blah blah, and that has its like compounding effect, and it grows on into your life, and you become like a new invigorated person. And you're like, wow, I can't believe like this. Once you're on self improvement for long enough, you're like, wow, I'm a completely different person. But eventually, in that progression of development, there becomes a time period where you hit a wall, and there seems to be this veil in your way that you can't seem to pierce through, you can't seem to see through, and it's like banging your head up against a brick wall. You just can't seem to make any more progression, and this is when it is required to have a deeper understanding of psychology, or have a faith in spirituality or some sort of religious experience, or just to be more emotionally intelligent. And to understand emotions, you need to understand the psyche, the soma, the soul, whatever it may be. You need a deeper intellectual and theoretical understanding of what it is to be a human being, to have a mind, to have a psyche, to be embodied in the material world. You need a deeper understanding of these things on a psychological level, and you can't pierce through these veils of living life artificially until you really understand and accept who you are on a deep level. So you could follow down the self-improvement advice, the very materialistic advice, to how to get into shape, how to do this and do that, and you can follow that down a certain path, and you can get really far. You can get rich, you can get in shape, you can get an attractive girlfriend, blah blah blah. But this won't alleviate the symptoms of the unease in your mind. Like, you still follow with all of these progressions, and your external world gets validated, it gets better, and that is in itself a pursuit that can internally evolve you. But there becomes a barrier, and there becomes a point where like you just can't seem to, the external stuff isn't giving you the internal peace that you expected it to give you. And this is how, when you get mega rich people, billionaires, and they're like, money doesn't solve your problems, it just solves money problems. And people get in shape and they finally get a six-pack and they feel more energetic, they feel healthy. But again, there's these steep psychological issues that they can't seem to escape from, they can't seem to run from, and nothing externally is alleviating the symptoms of their own mind. And as I said, this is when the deep understanding and the building of awareness comes into play. And that key point there, awareness, is the most important thing. If you're looking for any solutions in life, whether it's that you've got this like underlying sense of depression, or you've got this like real feeling of anxiety that just kind of like plagues your existence, it's always like underlying. It's like this undercurrent of anxiety with everything you do, or you're getting stuck in these like depressive moods that seem to like habitually come around more and more frequently, and they like penetrate your daily life. Whatever the psychological symptom is, these will not get solved until you learn to accept what they are and where they come from and how they feel. It's acceptance of everything. And to have any solution to a problem, I can't speak. To have a solution, to find a solution, to create a solution, you first need awareness. And so how do we build awareness? How do we become aware of like the psychological habitual patterns we get stuck in, or how do we become aware of the issues that are in our life, the issues that are in our minds, the issues that create up our ego structure, the psyche, the soma, whatever it may be? Like, how do we become aware of these? And I always tend to direct people first with some sort of mindfulness practice. I think meditation, and it doesn't have to be meditation, the fact that you just sit on a mat with your legs crossed, attached to the breath and really using that as your anchor and focusing on it. It can just be any sort of practice that gives you the ability to be introspective and to observe the mechanics of your own nature. Any time of like solitude that you can get just to examine and observe is going to really benefit you in unraveling the illusions that you're creating in your mind and to penetrating the core of the things you need to solve. And it's through stillness, it's through being quiet, it's through being in touch with what is actually happening in your existence of consciousness. That is how you start penetrating through the illusions. It's getting deeper to the core. The other stuff, the chasing things, the distracting yourself with material success and all this, they skim the surface. But the deep embodiment of like feeling what is really there in your consciousness, to truly observing with equanimity and like empathy what is actually happening in your existence. That is the stuff that gets and penetrates to the core of who you are. And this is what I really recommend people start with. It's just, even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes a day of just mindfulness. And if you want to do like a mindfulness practice, what I recommend you doing is what I mentioned before. It's just sit down, right? Close your eyes and just focus on the breath coming in and out of your nostrils. And as you breathe in, you can feel it like your lungs expand. You can feel the blood get oxygenated around your body. And then you can feel yourself breathe out. You can feel your chest kind of like come up and come down. You feel your stomach rise and fall. And just feel the sensations of what it's like to breathe. And just focus on the sensations of the breath. And that's what that's going to do is it's going to train your concentration of your mind to be aware of the things that are going on in your body and in your mind. You're going to train your concentration. You're going to train your ability to be aware of what is happening. And in a day and age of where everyone's trying to steal your attention, where society wants you to be as unconscious as possible, having this ability to train your mind to be able to concentrate and to be focused is invaluable. It's really going to benefit you in not just all of the other stuff I'm going to talk about, which is the psychological and the understanding of yourself and the development of your character and your soul. It's also going to help you in every other aspect of your life, whether that be to eating the correct food, whether that be to training, whether that be to understanding your finances, being in a relationship with someone. That is going to compound in every aspect of your life. But that's how I'd recommend. But there is a very there's something I want to warn you about, just with the mindfulness approach of just focusing on an anchor. When you just meditate like that, when you just focus on the breath coming in and out, I feel at a certain point your thoughts and emotions that arise can be suppressed because you're too busy focusing on the sensation of the breath. So as you start to meditate, right, I want you to first focus on the breath coming in and out of the nose and do that for 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe do it for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then for the rest of the time, I want you just to sit there and do nothing. Just to really close your eyes. Let the breathing come in naturally. Don't try to control the breath. Just observe the breath, but observe everything else that comes up in your mind. So train your concentration and your focus to be sharp. So you're breathing in and out and you're feeling the breath. But after 5 or 10 minutes, just sit back and do absolutely nothing. And anytime a sensation arises, anytime something comes up in your consciousness, whether it be a pain in your arm, whether it be a thought of, oh, I need to change my gym program, or, oh, I shouldn't have said that, I'm feeling anxious, whatever it is, if you're just, whatever's going on in your mind or your body, just feel that. And this is how you're going to truly start building awareness of what is going on in your mind, in your consciousness. And so that awareness, then you're going to start building up awareness of the patterns of thought and behavior that arise up into your consciousness. And this is going to be this is going to be the first true understanding of how your mind actually operates, how your body is feeling, how your energetic field of what it is to be human is being experienced as. And awareness is key. So yeah, like be in that mindfulness state every day. 10 to 15 minutes of 5 minutes of focusing on the breath and 10 minutes of just sitting there and watching your mind. And what happens is when you really sit in a true mindfulness state, and you can not detach, but you can disidentify. I can't speak today, boys. I've noticed since I haven't been doing the podcast, I'm always like and an ahhing, but I'm sure we'll get better as we go. When you can learn to disidentify away from the thoughts and away from the sensations, and you can sit as the observer. So what happens in like deep meditative states, and I should probably explain this psychologically as well, is that we have this like ego structure which is made up of everything that we've ever experienced, right? And it's narratives, it's feelings, it's emotions, it's everything that gets filtered through our consciousness and comes to our mind. Is our ego filters everything, right? And it's developed. It's a mental construct that's built over our lifetime. It starts as soon as we're born, and we get kind of domesticated into a society that has rules and has ideas of who we should be, and our parents have judgments of who they want us to be and who we are as a person, and we need to figure out, oh, I've got a name, I've got a label, and all of these processes build up this ego structure in your mind. But that ego structure is a part of you, but it's not you. And there is an observer behind kind of watching all this, and there's a way that you can tap into this observer by being mindful, by meditating. And the observer, we could call it just pure consciousness, or we could call it your soul. It's something that continues throughout your life, regardless of how you change. So you would often say that you're not the same person as you was when you was 10 years old. Like, you've got different values, you've got different likes and wants and desires, you've got different ways of reacting to things. You don't throw your toys at people anymore, but you was in essence still the same person as you was when you was 10, as when you was born. There's been this continuation of something that has come through your whole life, and it's not the ego, because it's not your values, it's not the labels, it's something beneath all of that. It's something deeper, it's something at the core, which is you, and it's something that continues throughout your whole life. The essence of you is still the same. Like, I'm still this essence of Alex Rogers that was probably even an energy before I was born, but we're not going to get metaphysical with this or come up with ideas. We'll just stick to very like practical. So as soon as I was born, there has been a continuation of Alex Rogers, the spectrum of consciousness, that has observed all of this. It's observed all of my life, from when I was learning to walk, to when I was running around kicking footballs in primary school, to when I was going up through school thinking I was cool, trying to like chat up women and taking substances, and then coming into my life now where I'm sat here recording a podcast. Has been a continuation of consciousness through all of that, and it's been observing all of this. And this observer, when you can tap into this through deep meditative states, it's behind all the thoughts, it's behind all the feelings, the emotions, the sensations. It's something that underlies at the core of the nature of what it is to be a conscious being. And tapping into this, when you really get into it, you start to realize that this consciousness, this being that is you, that is continuing through your life, is pure empathy and it's pure love. It feels pure compassion. It doesn't have any judgments on who you are. It's just there watching, and it feels like a motherly, fatherly figure, like the masculine and feminine together. It feels like it's just watching you, and it's a container for your life. And regardless of how difficult the times of your life get, this consciousness sits there undisturbed, always observing, always watching, always being a container for your ego, always being a container for who you are as a person. It kind of sits there and holds your ego in your hand and just like moves you through life, and it's continuing. It's always there. It's never ending. And when you can get in these spots and you can really feel the true compassion of what it is to be this source of consciousness, it alleviates, and it gives you that sense of warmth, and it gives you that sense of acceptance and awareness. When true awareness, like when it's built in with equanimity, which is the ability just to observe things as they are, when you can really tap into that state, you're showing yourself empathy. And why this is important is why it's important to get into these states and to try and bring transpersonal. We're going to call them transpersonal because they transcend beyond the personal identity. When you get into these transpersonal states of sitting in this consciousness, sitting in this like this source of being, this continuation of identity that's gone through your whole life. I forgot what I was going to say, boys. When you sit in with that, right? When you sit in with this, like this sort of bit of consciousness, It shows you empathy. It allows it has a container for you to be okay as you are, because it's not judging you. It's not coming from a place of rational thought. It's not coming from a place of societal structure, of societal programming, of the programming from your parents, from their judgments, from their insecurities and anxieties. It sits beyond that. It's far deeper than that. So whilst the ego construct is important, it puts us in the material world, and it keeps us thinking and feeding ourselves. This spiritual consciousness, we're going to call it, this observer, it's not influenced by all that. It's just always there. It's always watching. And some people call it God. It can be called God. It can be called whatever. I like to call it the natural observer. Sorry, boys, I had to stop the podcast because I feel like I wasn't being as comprehensive or articulate as I wanted. So the reason it's important to sit in that spiritual consciousness, to show yourself empathy by sitting in that mindfulness state, is because that empathy that we can give to ourselves allows our ego structure to feel safe. It allows us to feel heard. So what happens is, when we're born, you kind of got to think of it as your soul, or the essence of who you are, that spiritual consciousness, has to come into a body. So let's really think about it, how kind of like the spark of who we are, consciousness, it rather gets born when we're born, or it lives beyond that. It is kind of there beyond it, right? But whatever it is, whether if it's there before or whether it gets born right then, it has to be brought into our body. It needs to be able to feel like it exists in our body, right? And then once that happens, once it feels like it exists, the ego structure, the cognitive structure of what is the ego, right, develops with that soul, and it creates, and if it's embodied safely, if we get mirroring from the environment, let's say if we're growing up and our mum gives us a really loving container, and she looks at us with empathy, emphatically, and actually like mirrors the facts that we exist, we feel safe in this container as our body, and our ego develops and constructs in a safe environment. But what happens is, let's say if we don't, our parents, to their best of ability, they try and do that, but they don't do a good enough job to make us feel safe. They don't give us a safe enough container. What happens is our soul kind of feels, it doesn't feel safe in our body. And so it retracts a little bit because it feels like it's going to be annihilated because it doesn't feel safe. It retracts back to this level of spiritual consciousness, and our ego develops in an unhealthy container. It develops in an unhealthy structure, and it starts creating barriers and thoughts and emotions and blockages to protect our soul away from reality, because it doesn't feel like it's safe in reality. And then that's where, when our ego, the thoughts and narratives, they all come from a place of scarcity, and they all come from a place of protection, and that's trauma. It comes from a place of trauma instead of a developmental place of being emphatically seen in the environment. So as we develop and as we grow, and this happens to everyone, because for parents, the mum and the dad, they sit in that archetypal energy of the feminine and masculine nature as much as possible, but because they are humans who have been brought up by other humans, they can't embody what it is to be the maternal mother or the pure masculine father. They've got their own issues that they've been brought into, just like we have. So they struggle to make us feel seen as we actually are. And so we grow up believing that it's not safe to be us because our parents don't look at us for who we truly are. They look at us through the projections of who they want us to be, and their judgments and their insecurities and their anxieties. And then we live in a society that doesn't reflect people for who they truly are. Society has these like unwritten rules and these structures of, you have to act in this certain way, you can't act like that, you can't act like that. Like kids get angry and their parents go, you can't be angry, and they scold their kids for being angry. And that natural expression of anger which is a natural human feeling, gets suppressed in the body. We realize our ego structure understands that it's not safe to express anger, so our soul retreats, and the ego creates barriers over, you're not an angry person, you suppress anger, and then that then creates a character. It creates an ego structure of someone who never gets angry. But what happens then is, the emotions are polarities, right? They sit on a spectrum, and anger is actually attached to pure joy, enjoyment, pure blissfulness. And so if you suppress anger, by simultaneously suppressing anger, you suppress joy and you suppress all the human emotions. And so when things get repressed, when we don't get mirrored to the fact that we exist in reality, all of our emotions get suppressed and we stop actually feeling like we're a human, and we create cognitions, we create habits, and we create suppression from actually being a human. And then we go through life living out that ego structure, that narrative of being dissociated away from the human experience, away from the emotions or feelings of what it is to actually be a human. And so why it's important to sit in the meditative states is because that consciousness lies beyond the external environment. Like, you're not always going to get empathy, like perfect empathy, who mirrors who you are in the external reality, because people who would normally give you that look through a lens of their own judgments. So when we go inwards and we tap into this spiritual nature, our soul, consciousness, God, whatever you call it, that holds a container for us to be heard. It holds a container for us to be seen as we are. And that allows our soul a safe journey back into our body, and it dissolves the barriers of the ego. You can get this by going in nature. The reason why nature feels so healing, the reason why looking at a nice view or going out and hearing running water is because, or for example, a pet, say if you've got a dog and it shows you unconditional love and it's always wagging its tail and it's always like licking your face and it's always happy to see you, regardless, it's always happy to see you, nature's always makes you feel calm, is because them things hold a container for you to feel safe. They hold a container for love for you, unconditional love. And humans, by their own nature, can't give unconditional love because we get trained in a society that swaps love for conditions. It's like, if you're a good boy, you get praised. If you do this, you get that. You get attention if you do that. If you do this wrong, you get scolded. And they're all conditions that underlie love. But when you come into the nature of who you are, when you go out into nature, when you like sit with a dog that just shows pure unconditional love, you are getting that unconditional support of, and that mirroring of, you actually exist as you are. You're okay as you are. And so anything that brings you mindfulness, whether that be going out into nature and taking a walk, whether that be sitting in a meditation practice, whether that be just anything that brings you that sense of calmness and equanimity and that ability just to sit there and feel seen and to feel. Anything that allows you that, to do it in a safe manner, is going to make you feel more embodied and make you feel safe. And once you do that, once you find a container for actually feeling safe and feeling heard, that's when the ego construct starts to break down and dissolves, because now you're giving it alternative evidence to these ideas of who it thinks it is, and the soul can like transcend back into the body and it can penetrate through the ego's narratives. And a lot of the narratives from the ego, whether that be I'm not good enough, I don't know what I'm doing, I can't speak to that person, I can't speak to this. They come from a place of protection because they feel like if you go out and try, if you go out and do that thing, if you expose the true nature of who you are, you're going to be annihilated. It equals in a sort of death. But when you realize that you can't really die in a certain sense, your ego structure can die, but the nature of who you are, the consciousness, resides through your whole life and maybe even beyond life. When you can sit there with that safe container, you're like, wow, it's okay to try things, because regardless of what happens, I'm going to be okay. I still continue. But the ego, it's a subtle thing. It goes off survival. It wants to survive. It doesn't always want to be right. It doesn't want what's good for you. It wants to be right. Because it being right then reinforces the fact that it survives. It's a thing that exists. And it's all fear-based. The ego, a lot of it works off fear-based. If you've got a healthy ego, which is integrated in with your soul and in with your body, it'll be a healthy ego. It'll be one that is one of compassion and love. But when you've been brought up with this never being emphatically mirrored, never really like you actually exist, never feeling like you're truly a person, always feeling like you have to act in certain ways to get attention or love, when you grow up like that, you're going to find that, yeah, you don't feel safe. You feel like taking a risk, putting yourself out there, opening yourself up to a relationship. These things are going to feel so scary and so alarming because your ego has created narratives around. They're not safe. They're not things that you do, because when you were growing up, you never got the the safe container of you can try things and you exist. You're going to be okay. And anything that makes you feel okay is going to make you feel better, and it's going to break down them barriers, and it's going to allow you to move forward. And I think that point I said before was really interesting. It's just popped into my mind now of like emotions are polarities, right? They sit on a spectrum, and there's one end which is what we call the negative emotions, and one end which we call the positive emotions. And we live in a society where all the positive emotions are very idealized, and they're promoted. It's like, yeah, you should be happy and you should be confident and you should be this and that. But then any sort of bad emotion, whether it be depression, anger, anxiety, they're all shunned away. They're all looked at like these really negative things. Even the idea of the labels of positive and negative, they're labeled in that way. But without a negative, you don't have a positive. There needs to be something to contrast it with. That is the nature of polarity. There needs to be one end or another. There needs to be a contrast between the two. And if you suppress the anxiety, if you suppress depression, if you suppress fear, if you suppress anger's a big one in our society. It's not okay to be angry. Like, people get looked at funny if they act out angrily. When people suppress these so bad, they suppress the other spectrum of what it is to be a positive one. So anger and blissfulness. So if you don't feel anger and you don't know how to express it in a healthy way, then you're never going to feel pure blissfulness, because they're on a spectrum. That one is evolved with the other. They're not separate things. They're simultaneously separate but the same thing. Paradoxes. And this is what meditation has gave me over the years. And this is what also reading psychological text gives me. So I'm reading, as I might have mentioned before, psychosynthesis. Just reading books that allow you to understand these concepts. The therapeutic understanding like sits in your mind, and you start habitually thinking and deprogramming your mind through a therapeutic point of view. And just by intellectualizing and understanding your whole nature of how your mind perceives things and operates and how open it is to things changes, because it starts actually understanding the processes behind why these things happen. And this is why it's so important to like cultivate out time for meditation, for reading psychology. Go deeper than the standard self-improvement advice. Pick up a psychology book. Like, this is a book that barely anyone reads this sort of stuff. This is like what therapists read. This is what psychologists read, what psychoanalysts read. And these are the people you'll go to when you need help. So you'll go to a psychologist when you need help. And whilst it's important to do that, like, go and see a psychologist, go and see a therapist, read the things that they're reading, understand the way that they understand the mind. I know it might not be your passion, or you might not think you have time for it, but you have a life that you live, and all of that comes from your mind. It all comes from the knowledge that you have in your mind. It all comes from how you experience a world. So this stuff is helping you understand the mind. It's helping you experience a world in a more natural way. It's so important. So cultivate time for it, even if it's just time to listen to my podcast. This is all stuff that's like getting you deeper. It's getting you to understand the nature of who you are more, and it's going to allow a better form of self-expression. And it's why meditation is so important. It is so important. Meditation, reading, anything that just allows you to understand psychology on a deeper level, understands your idea of a spirituality, of a God of consciousness, because it's what we are. Like, what else are you going to do than try and understand out who you are in life? You can go through your whole life living through the ego constructs of these fake narratives and suppressing everything you feel, but you're just going to be perpetually depressed, perpetually anxious, and you're always going to feel inauthentic. Imagine what a life would feel like where, wow, my feet are actually on the ground and I feel like I can express myself authentically, and I'm held in this container where I feel safe. And like, life can be challenging, it can be really hard, but I'm out there achieving things and I'm trying things, and I've not constantly got this inner critic that it's like chastising me for everything I do. Every room that I walk into, it's constantly narrating in my mind how weird I am, how I don't fit in. Imagine if you could work through that and you could feel safe, you could feel heard, you could act who you are without caring what other people think, or without having this constant inner critic that's going to put you down all the time. That is possible, but you have to be able to sit in the deep trauma, the deep emotions that reside in your nervous system, that reside within the ego structure. You need to try and bring your soul back into your body so you feel more alive. And it's a process. Don't rush this. Like, it takes time. And this has took me, I started this whole journey like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, just working out, sitting in the gym. And then I started meditating. I started meditating like 5 years ago, and now I'm reading psychology books and like materially, and like some of the stuff I've done this last year, I've actually dropped off going to the gym. I've dropped off some of the other stuff that I always thought were what made me me. But I feel simultaneously, whilst them things dropped, I feel now the most I've ever felt. And now I've got a relationship. I've got good things going on in my life. I've got this passion to read psychology, and this comes from opening myself up more to understanding who I actually am. And society and like people and our own structure of who we think we are, like they create illusions of who we actually like think we want to be. And so we go down these paths in life of I'm going to start my own business and do this and do that because that's what every rich person says on Instagram, or this is what everyone's doing, and that's what it means to be successful. And we really do go by the constructs of society of what success is, which is to be rich and famous, and we idolize that. We idolize these things, but the true nature of who you are, when you sit into it, it doesn't care about all that. It's not built into the structure of society. In your DNA is this like pure expression of authenticity that wants to unravel itself out into the universe. And the more you can step aside from the ego's narratives and the ideas and the conceptions of who you think you are, the more you can actually come into who you actually are. You'll watch that unravel into the world, and it'll be a pure form of expression. And it might not be the riches, it might not be the fame, you might not be this special person, but you can live out authentically. And people who are rich and famous want that more than anyone. Why is it a common thing that like rich people and famous people are always like, not rich people, but some rich people as well, are always like really unhappy and really depressed? It's because they live out them expectations and structures of trying to get attention from people from childhood trauma. They might have never been looked at empathically. They might not really realize that they do exist in the world. So they create these ego structures, these narratives of I need to get famous and rich so people will like me, and they live this out. And whilst then they get stuck in substance addiction because they realize that the expectation of being famous didn't actually make them feel seen or heard, and now they're just giving up on life and blah 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 blah, and they end up depressed, end up suicidal or whatever. Not every famous person, but it's a common thing of famous people that seems to happen. Nothing out there. I don't know why I said nothing really weird then. Nothing out there is going to give you the ease of mind that you're looking for. It really starts within the acceptance of your mind, the acceptance of who you are. And again, it comes from journaling, meditating, and reading stuff like this. Going speaking to a psychologist, just being seen by people. There is only a certain amount of progress you can make. It's quite slow progress meditating, and meditating will like really enlighten you, but it can be a lot of like tedious work. It can be slow. You can really like, sometimes you need to start in that. You need to start in the container of like accepting yourself and working on accepting yourself. But finding someone in your life that can empathically help you with showing you love will really like benefit you. Whether that's like you can actually go out and find a girlfriend and like go out and date and find a woman that like really does like want you to succeed and wants to help you and doesn't want to judge you. Like that can benefit you so much. When it's not just, oh, this woman's fit and I want to blah, 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 or I'm just chasing a girlfriend for the sake of being lonely. When you find someone you really connect with and you can stare at them in the eyes and you can feel like you're seen and they can help you with the stuff you're going through, that again, that dissolves the barriers of the ego. It opens you up to feeling more. It breaks down the barriers and it gives you that container of unconditional love. You can get friendships that do that. I don't know, if someone's watching this, I'd love to hear people with their problems. Like, just speak to me, just message me on Instagram. Just like, I don't know, I'll go meet up with you and have a coffee. I'm not going to say I'm going to shower you with unconditional love, but you can have someone who you can talk to who it's like, dude, I'm really struggling with like depression or anxiety and like it's really affecting me. Like, and I can sit there and go, mate, I've been in exactly the same spot. Like, what is it how do you feel? Like, what are the barriers you're going through? And I can sit there and help you, or I can speak to you. I'll not even help you. I can have a conversation. It's the same when I find people. I've got one of my friends, like he's probably my only friend who I can like really like connect to and speak to about like real deep stuff like that. I've got a couple, but like this guy, like I've experienced a lot with him. We've been a lot of traveling, and like we work in a similar sort of way. And he helps me when we're both going through problems. I ring him, or I'll speak to him. I'll go meet him, and it's like, dude, like we're struggling with this. I'm struggling with that, and we listen to each other, and it helps. It really does help. Like take away the seriousness of it all. It gives you what you're looking for. It gives you that container of someone cares and someone looks at you, and that can develop you just as much as you doing that within yourself. But it's a yin and a yang. It's like out there and in there. I think that's everything I'm trying to say, people, to be honest. I don't know if I need to say much more than that. I think I'll just be talking for the sake of talking, if not. Yeah, thank you very much for listening, people. I hope that episode was concise. I feel like it was a bit more concise. I did get a little bit lost in the middle, so I had to stop and record the other half, which is something I haven't done with a podcast in a while. So it just shows what like practice does for you. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, people. Appreciate you all again. And I hope the episodes are hitting. I hope you're having a good time in life. I hope everything's moving smoothly. If not, don't forget that there is a container who's making sure that you're all right. Everything's going to be fine. And yeah, thank you very much for listening, people. And I'll see you all in the next episode.